So an engineer walks into an art expo, and that sounds like the beginning of a really bad joke, but it's how I spent my weekend, and it was just the only line I could think about as I was spending my weekend. So I was at the Small Press Expo up in Bethesda, Maryland, and right now I'm hiking a neighborhood trail that's not far from there. It supposedly has a lake, so we're going to go find out, see if we can find it. But yeah, I was at the Small Press Expo Saturday and Sunday this weekend, and it's an art expo that's focused on comics and graphic novels and things like that. I'm not really into the whole comics graphic novel scene. Like I know a little bit, but like I'm not part of the following. I don't speak the language. I don't know a lot of the artists and things. So it's kind of funny because they would mention people's names and I would totally not know who they were talking about, which was fine. Except for Charles Schultz. I knew who he was, but, Snoopy and everything. But yeah, I totally didn't get a lot of the, artist, comic, cultural jokes and things like that. But I did attend a lot of the workshops, which is what I wanted to talk about because as an engineer, I've been working on exploring my creative side and what all of that means. And this expo is nice. It's 2 days and it's a bunch of artists that put on workshops and they're there just to share their knowledge with everyone. So it's really fantastic that people are willing to share their knowledge and teach others about their area of expertise. One of the workshops I went to right off the bat was a choose your own path. It had to be called choose your own path because if you remember from the 1980s, the choose your own adventure books, which I was a fan of, that is actually like a restricted, copyrighted trademark kind of thing. So the artist was telling us, make sure you call it choose your own path. But it was how to do like a choose your own path little zine comic, which I loved because I'm really enjoying making zines lately. And so it was like how to like quickly draw these things in like 30 to 45-minute time frame. So come up with a story, come up with like alternate endings for the story, and then figure out how to illustrate it and draw it. So it was a lot of fun. It really brought back to me the whole like, don't overthink it. Don't worry about making it perfect. Just throw all that when I would just sit down and quickly like sketch an idea, which was a lot of fun. And it was like, the artist teaching it was like, just come up with the most zany ideas that you can. So in his case, he was talking about Batman is hungry. Does Batman eat a sandwich or does he like fall into this like crazy wormhole abyss? And so I kind of followed along with that. I was like, okay, he wanted this to be crazy. So I just made up a little story of a squirrel who wanted to find peanuts. So it was like, does the squirrel go to the park or does the squirrel check out the bird feeder? And at the park, it was like the park had been totally invaded by aliens and a whole battle could ensue. Or there could be like a whole like, communicate with them. And then the other alternative path was visiting the bird feeder. The birds had declared war on the squirrels. And so it was like, does the squirrel, my character's name was Squeaky, by the way. Does Squeaky the squirrel negotiate a peace treaty with the birds, or does Squeaky, come rouse an entire squirrel army to fight back? So this was like all that came out, in just a 30 to 45-minute drawing session, which was a lot of fun. But that's what I took away from that workshop, was just not overthinking. And there's a lot you can do when you have that time pressure of, I only have a certain amount of time to get this done. So just throw everything, throw all the logical thinking out, and just like put things down on paper and see where it goes. Like see where the ideas and the story goes. So that was the first workshop, and then the second workshop. I'm looking at my notes here, so I didn't forget what we all did. The second workshop was working on character avatars. So if you think about the little, like in hospitals, they have the little pain management scale face that goes from like 0 of everything's fine to 10, which is like I'm dying. That little pain face guy. It was talking about how even in a simple drawing you can convey emotion. So in that amount of time, we had to come up with a character and just focus on showing the emotion of that character, through facial expressions and things. What was interesting to me in that workshop was the teacher was an art teacher that teaches a lot of students. She teaches middle school students, and what she mentioned in the class was that middle school is the time that a lot of students stop drawing, which I found interesting but also tragic, because coming from the engineering and science world, I had always heard also that was like the time students stop doing science and math. So it's just like middle school is this like really troubling time where we seem to turn away from these things. I personally ended up sticking with science and math, but I did stop, like, I think that was at the time, like, yeah, I stopped like focusing on the drawing because I was like, oh my gosh, I got to figure out what I want to do. And, I was already like worrying about future careers and everything. Even in middle school, I was like, yeah, an intense little kid, which is, yeah, kind of funny. But anyway, that was something really interesting that I learned in that session. In the evening, I attended a session. It was called Carousel, which was where it was almost like a panel session, but it was several artists would have a slideshow go of their work. So they would do a chapter or one of their shorter pieces of work, and they would narrate it, which was really interesting because when we read books and we read comics and graphic novels and things like that, we're the audience, so we hear things differently. Like the voice in our head is very different than perhaps like what the author intended when they were making the piece. And so to hear the actual author present their work in their voice and narrate it in that way was like really fascinating. And one of the artists said, no matter what, be sure to tell your story. And that really resonated with me because that made me think about this. Like when I'm doing with my videos here, I feel like, I don't want to stop doing it, because this is how I am telling my story. So I took his message to heart, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna keep going with this, because everybody needs to tell their story. And he said, be sure you tell your story or else somebody else will tell it for you. So yeah, I really enjoyed his artwork, but also enjoyed the message that he was giving us. So that was pretty much all of day one. And then I returned for day two, which was today. And one of the sessions was, again, I'm looking at my notes here so I don't forget, cover art design. So two teachers were talking about how they both published books. One went with a large traditional publisher, and the other, she went through a smaller publisher. And it was just really interesting in how they portrayed where their ideas started from for the artwork for their own books, and where they ended up after working with the graphic design team and things like that. So it was interesting because where they ended up was very different than where they started, like what their ideas were for their books. And a lot of it was like stories of having to collaborate with other people. So again, working in teams, but through a creative process. And they both said, yeah, we had to collaborate, and kind of negotiate back and forth on what we were doing. But they also would say things like, some of the ideas that were presented to them from the graphic artists were not in line with the story or the vibe of their book. And so they were very much about sticking up for their voice, for their story, and saying, no, the colors aren't right here, or the illustration isn't right for what I know my story is in my book. And at the end, they both said, how the covers of their books came out great, came out completely different than where they thought they would end up, but that they were happy with the end product. That, yeah, it was a lot of back and forth, it was a lot of discussion, it was a lot of design work and everything, but at the end they were very, very happy with their product. So yeah, in a way it was a little bit more of that, making sure you're telling your story in the way that you want to tell it. And then also today I attended a session by an artist who's a cartoonist for the New Yorker. And what was interesting to me was her story, where she was from California, from the West Coast, lived and worked in LA for many, many years. I'm dropping my notes here. Just a second. Okay. Can't do that. And so she was living in California for many years, and she was always drawing. Her father was friends with Charles Schulz, which is why I was bringing up Charles Schulz earlier. So she grew up drawing Snoopy all the time. And then she wanted to get into filmmaking. So over time and into adulthood, she got into filmmaking. She did a lot of documentary work, and she was saying some of her documentary films got discovered, and she even won awards for them, which was really, really cool. But that she was, even through making films and things, she was always doodling. She was always still illustrating. And she got to a point in her life, she said, where she was like, I think I want to do this. I think I want to be an illustrator and a cartoonist. So she up and moved to New York, completely on a whim, she said, just up and quit her job, moved her life, moved to New York, and was waitressing and things like that. And eventually worked her way into submitting. She was submitting every single day, and she got picked up by the New Yorker. And so it was just interesting to hear that, and interesting to hear about how stressful it was for her to be funny. She now analyzes every situation, and she carries a notebook with her of things where she's like, oh, is that funny? I have to write it down because I might be able to make a comic out of it. So it struck me one, to take that risk and completely give up one life to go after a dream for another life. That was really interesting, and I found that very admirable. But then also that even in a job where somebody could say it's like a dream job, like, oh my gosh, you draw for the New Yorker, that's like a dream job, that it's still stressful, that there's still that, stress in creating ideas and fear of rejection and having to create a large volume of work. She said every week they have to submit 10 comics and 10 ideas. Yeah, no worries. Okay, thank you. We have bikers passing by on the trail here. But yeah, she was submitting 10 ideas every single week. So to me, that just really struck me. I feel as an engineer, spending time in creative life and exploring these things is kind of a luxury, because I get to do it for fun. I get to attend this expo just for fun, and it's not like my livelihood or my making rent or anything like that, or being able to buy groceries depends on it. So yeah, to listen to the story of somebody who's in that creative life and still have that, talking about the reality of the stress of it, but that they, she still loved what she does. She still really enjoys it. And just, yeah, I was like grateful that she shared that story with us, because it was something that like I'd never even considered, like that's how it might be for somebody who's living and working in a creative field. So yeah, there was a lot. I also wandered through the expo area once in a while when I could, which was, I'm going to admit, completely like overwhelming. It's your standard large ballroom in a hotel that is filled wall to wall and just completely one on top of the other of these booths of artists and their artwork. And for me, it was like, it's just, they're so crammed in there that it was really hard to even see their work. And it was really crowded. And for me, that's like one of the toughest things I deal with is expo halls and trying to navigate large crowds. And in those situations, my social anxiety also comes up. Like, I want to look at their artwork and I want to see what they have, but also it's difficult to approach and start that conversation in such a like high energy, crowded environment. So most of the time I just wander through and look at their stuff and just like nod and smile. But yeah, that's something I'm still working on. So yeah, anyway, that's like everything that happened at the expo this entire weekend. Really great. I came out of there with like a lot of really cool ideas for what I can do with things that I'm working on. And that was the whole point, you know. Some people are there for, you know, to meet their favorite artists, or they're there because they want to publish their graphic novel or their comics in the future. I was just getting ideas for like zines that I want to work on, and yeah, just different things to try in my creative journey. And I definitely came away from that. You know, I enjoyed the workshops and the panels and just hearing from artists and hearing from like a totally different field than like engineering expos that I'm used to. So it was really interesting and really reminded me to keep working on things creatively that help to tell my story. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to keep sharing with all of you on all of these different walks as my story unfolds, like weekends like this. And I will thank you for joining me on this walk through the forests of Maryland, past the lake and everything. And I will see you on the next one.